Is that you, Emily?
When I turned around at the sound of that voice while having tea with my family at a cafe, my ex husband Bob stood there, and beside him was the woman, Rachel, who had taken him from me years ago.
Oh, what's this? You got married?
I glared at him silently.
I see. The infertile reject is still single, huh? Planning to remarry with someone else's kid? You two are a perfect match.
Bob said this with an amused smirk. I slammed my hand on the table and stood up. What? Who are you calling infertile?
What? It's not true. Come on, don't lie.
Bob laughed mockingly. Feeling sick to my stomach, we decided to leave the cafe. As we walked out, we passed by two young girls who seemed to be their daughters. Suddenly, one of the girls ran back toward me, calling out loudly. Out of breath, she said,
I'm Betty, their daughter. I have something significant to talk to you about, Emily.
she pleaded with me desperately. My name is Emily Sawyer, and I'm 45 years old. I live with my husband, Nick, who is 3 years younger, our daughter, Natalie, and Nick's parents, making us a family of five. Nick is a chef, and I work in a sales position. We both tend to be workaholics. Sometimes I worry that our 12-year-old daughter, Natalie, might feel lonely. However, Nick's parents, who live with us, understand our work situation and are kind yet firm with Natalie, which allows us to focus on our jobs with peace of mind. On the rare occasions when we have a day off together, we enjoy Nick's fantastic cooking. Even Natalie is envious of his skills and takes every opportunity to learn from him. But I could never have imagined 17 years ago that such a happy life would come my way. The reason is that Nick is actually my second husband. I got divorced 17 years ago. My ex husband was Bob, a colleague 5 years older than me. In my 20s, I moved from sales, where we both worked, to an administrative role after we got married, trying to balance work and being a housewife. At the time, I thought we were having a generally good marriage, but apparently I was the only one who felt that way. One day, out of the blue, Bob asked for a divorce. Why? What happened? Why so suddenly? I was in shock, staring at the divorce papers he handed me. I had no idea what was going on. Then, Bob's expression became more serious than I had ever seen.
You know, we still don't have any kids.
What? I was stunned. Bob had never mentioned anything like that since we got married, but his mother, Susan, often pressured me about it. We lived with his parents then, and for 3 years, Susan would ask almost every day when we would have kids. I had tried to keep Bob from noticing her nagging as much as possible. I was concerned about not having kids yet, too. But I also felt that forcing myself into fertility treatments wouldn't necessarily change things quickly. It'll happen when it happens. That's what I thought. But I was naive. You want a divorce because I can't have kids?
It's not just that.
I had a bad feeling.
Do you remember Rachel?
Of course I do. She was my junior in the sales department. Why? As one thought crossed my mind, Bob spoke.
Well, Rachel is pregnant with my child.
What? I was at a loss for words. Everything was a complete shock to me. Bob's affair, and the fact that his affair was with Rachel. I can't accept this. You can't just tell me to divorce you because you got someone else pregnant. I argued back with all my strength, but Bob, unfazed, said,
But my mom is on board with it.
at that moment, I realized where this was coming from. When I asked her about it later, Susan bluntly confirmed,
Yes, I support Bob and Rachel being together.
Why? I mean, Bob cheated on me. How can you accept that, Susan?
Oh, I can accept it.
I was speechless at her words.
But look, you haven't shown any signs of having kids. I've been worried about you all this time.
Well, she might have been concerned. From her perspective,
You two never said you didn't want kids, right? So it must be your body that has the problem.
then Bob added,
See? I told you, Mom wants to see her grandkids, but you showed no sign of that happening, so what else could we do?
with that, Bob shoved the divorce papers before me as I stood there in shock. Feeling like I had no place left, I gave up and signed the papers without hesitation. Looking back, I would have asked for a proper division of assets or alimony. But I needed to be in the right frame of mind to think clearly. Word of the divorce and its reason quickly spread at work. Meanwhile, Rachel quit her job and quickly settled into being a stay-at-home mom after having the baby. As for me, instead of being seen as the poor woman who was cheated on, rumors spread that I must have been lacking in charm since my husband left me for someone else. Eventually, I quit my job. I couldn't stand the curious whispers and stares anymore. For a while, I just holed up in a small apartment I had moved into after the divorce. But no matter how much I stayed inside, I still got hungry. Not being particularly good at cooking, I decided to step outside. I was drawn by the smell of a small restaurant. As I stood there staring at the menu for a long time, I heard the chef's voice asking what I'd like to order. I must have been staring for quite a while. That's when I realized just how exhausted I really was. As I ate, tears began to stream down my face, and I sniffled. Even so, I kept eating silently, and the chef quietly placed some extra napkins before me. That chef was Nick, who is now my husband. After that, I started visiting the restaurant often, and eventually Nick and I started dating. Even though I was older and divorced, our feelings for each other didn't change, and we married relatively quickly. Shortly after, I discovered I was pregnant with our daughter, Natalie. Unlike Susan, Nick's parents were wonderful people. Since my family was far away, I was genuinely grateful that his parents treated me like their daughter. They even encouraged me to work if I wanted to, saying it wasn't good to be cooped up at home. So I started helping at Nick's restaurant, which was short-staffed, and I took over the accounting work that the owner wasn't fond of. A few years later, the owner fell ill and retired, and since Nick had already proven his skills, he took over the restaurant. And for over 10 years now, our work and family life have been going smoothly. One day, Nick, Natalie, and I were out as a family, enjoying a cafe hopping day. For Nick and me, it was half fun, half research. We were discussing things like, this menu is great, or maybe they should rethink the portion sizes here.
Hey, is that Emily?
I turned around, and there stood a man I had nearly forgotten, Bob. And next to him,
Oh, wow. It really is Emily. Remember me? It's Rachel.
there she was, Rachel, with that annoyingly high-pitched, cutesy voice that didn't suit her age. She was 5 years younger than me then, so she must be 40 now. She was already middle-aged, yet dressed and made up like she was much younger, almost embarrassingly. It's been a long time, I replied stiffly. Nick and Natalie, sensing my unease, exchanged concerned glances. Then Bob, as if to rub salt in the wound, asked.
Oh, so you got married?
I glared at him silently.
I see. The defective one who couldn't have kids is still single. What? Are you planning on getting remarried with his stepchild? Two-time losers, right? You're perfect for each other.
Bob said this as if he found the situation amusing. Nick and Natalie looked bewildered, their eyes wide in confusion at his senseless words. I slammed my hand on the table and stood up. What? Who are you calling infertile?
Come on, Emily. Why are you suddenly getting mad?
What? Is it not true? You couldn't have kids, so you married someone with a child, right?
This must be the child Rachel was pregnant with back then. I pointed at Nick and Natalie and finally said firmly, "No, it's not true. I've been married to him for a long time, and this is our child, the one I gave birth to."
Yeah, right. You're just making that up.
Bob said, laughing smugly. I can't believe this. Why is he ignoring everything I'm saying and insisting I'm infertile?
Let's get out of here.
Nick said, urging me to leave. Natalie looked anxious as well. Yeah, let's go. It's not worth dealing with him.
Oh, so you're leaving? Great, then this seat's open. Hey, come over here.
A college-age girl walked over from the entrance, looking a bit sulky. So, this must be the child Rachel was pregnant with back then, I thought as I passed by her.
Let's just forget about this place and head to the next cafe.
Yeah, this time, let's actually enjoy our tea. We checked the map and moved on. It was then that it happened. The girl from earlier ran up to me, calling out loudly. Catching her breath, she said,
I'm Betty, Bob's daughter. I have something significant to talk to you about, Emily.
She pleaded with me earnestly. And that was the first step that changed our fate. 6 months later, I found myself heading to a particular building. My destination was a company on one of the upper floors. Excuse me, I'm Emily Sawyer, here to meet with William, the head of sales.
Thank you for waiting, Emily Sawyer.
He started to say my name, but something clicked, and he looked surprised.
Wait, could you be Emily Johnson?
William had called me by my maiden name. Yes, this was the company I used to work for. Yes, it's been a long time, William. I smiled warmly at my former boss.
So, the new tenant moving in downstairs, is that?
Yes, it's my store.
Oh wow, I can't believe it.
William responded with an exaggerated gesture of surprise.
Hey, I'm really sorry about back then. I wish I could have done more.
William, you were in a different department at the time. It couldn't be helped.
True, but I still feel bad for what you went through. I was his boss, after all.
Just then, Bob walked into the office, probably returning from a sales call.
What? What are you doing here? Did running into me the other day bring you back?
I silently watched Bob continue his usual lighthearted banter, even in this place. Was he even aware that his boss was standing right there?
Hey, you're not thinking of getting back together, are you?
Hey, what are you talking about?
William quickly stepped in to calm Bob down. It was only then that Bob seemed to realize I was with his boss. He hastily apologized to William.
Emily is here today for a business meeting.
A business meeting? What?
Seeing Bob's surprise, I decided to explain. You know that ground floor space that's been vacant for a while?
Now that you mention it.
My new store is moving in there. Bob couldn't help but exclaim in surprise when he saw them.
Wait a minute. Isn't that spot supposed to be taken by some big-name coffee chain?
That's right, isn't it, William? I turned to William, including him in the conversation.
Yes, it is. Everyone's been looking forward to that store opening.
So what? You got a job in the sales department of that chain?
No. I took a deep breath and continued. It's my store. Bob looked even more baffled.
Hold on, Bob. I'm not sure what you're misunderstanding, but didn't I mention that the owner of that coffee chain was coming today?
The owner?
Bob looked back and forth between William and me, sweat forming on his forehead.
Listen, Bob, this is a business meeting, so let's keep it professional. Sorry about that, Emily.
Oh, don't worry. Today's meeting is an opportunity for everyone here to try our coffee. As soon as I said that, the whole office lit up.
Wait, are you treating us to coffee from that place?
The young office ladies were quick to respond. Yes, that's right. I hope you become one of our top clients and that we can build a long-term relationship. Today, I'd like to offer you all a small preview before the grand opening. If you'd like, please come down to the store. That sounds good, right? I looked at William.
Absolutely. Let's all take you up on that offer. Everyone, let's go.
Almost the entire floor, except those who said they'd stay behind to cover, headed downstairs at once. The manager of the new store greeted them. The staff, who had been waiting, welcomed the employees as they arrived. Please, everyone, have a seat. As I said this, the employees eagerly sat down, almost with the enthusiasm of children. Our coffee isn't known for being particularly unique. It's more affordable and straightforward than those famous, overly elaborate coffee chains. Our menu is easy to understand, with delicious food as our main attraction. We offer takeout lunches and slightly pricier dinners when you want something special. The first store we opened with this concept became a hit. After that, we trained staff and expanded. Now, I'm the CEO of a coffee chain with an annual revenue of $5 billion. Now, how about you two join me over here? I invited William and Bob to a table slightly apart from the others. As I did, a few people stood up.
What?
Bob couldn't help but blurt out in surprise when he saw them.
Wait a minute, Betty. What are you doing here?
What do you mean, Dad?
Betty laughed through her nose and continued.
I'm a guest today, too.
But I thought only staff were here right now.
Bob stammered.
I am part of the team today. Oh, and Dad, I should tell you, my other dad is here too.
Bob didn't seem to understand what Betty was saying. Ignoring her father's confusion, Betty continued.
Let me introduce you. This is Robert, my real dad.
Bob looked even more bewildered.
Well, you wouldn't understand, Dad. We're still missing one more guest.
With that, Betty turned toward the display window. On the other side, a woman hurriedly approached, glancing around nervously. It was Rachel, dressed as youthfully as she had been when we met 6 months ago. Rachel rushed through the door.
Betty, where's Betty?
She hurried toward us, looking frantic.
There's the other guest. Mom, over here.
Betty's calm voice guided her. Rachel turned to see us and quickly approached, her expression turned to shock.
Betty, why are you with him?
Rachel asked, her voice trembling.
Why? Because he's also my dad.
Betty replied, her voice steady as she faced her stunned mother. Watching the two of them, Bob finally grasped what was happening.
Rachel, do you know this man? Do you have some connection with him?
I don't know him. I've never seen him before.
Rachel shook her head vehemently and tried to leave, but Nick and I stopped her. Since you're here, why not have coffee? I suggested, offering her a chair and asking the staff to bring her some coffee.
Yes, this place has become quite popular recently. You should at least stay for one cup.
With that, Betty almost forcibly seated Rachel. What a brave young woman. I've heard she's only 16. Yes, that day Betty had chased after us and asked for our help. She told me she had heard I was once married to her father, Bob. Betty shared her concerns with me when we sat down at a cafe. Someone had recently come forward claiming to be her birth father.
I was told that you divorced my dad because my mom was pregnant with me.
Who told you that?
My grandmother.
Susan. Of course, she would tell her granddaughter something like that. It was very much like her, I thought. Have you talked to anyone else about this person? I asked.
No, I haven't told anyone.
She answered. And you're okay sharing this with me, a near stranger? Such an important thing? Didn't you talk to your mom about it?
It's fine. I don't trust my mom, especially when it comes to men.
Betty said bluntly.
Because I don't trust her, I thought this man could be my real father.
That man turned out to be Robert, sitting with us now. Of course, at first, she spoke to him with suspicion, but she said she eventually became convinced because of the gifts.
Ever since I was little, my mom would suddenly give me expensive clothes or accessories that were out of reach. And it always happened when my dad was away on business trips.
When she was younger, she just felt happy about the unique gifts. But as she grew older, she sensed something wasn't right. One day, during a conversation with Robert, she casually asked if he had ever given her a gift. Robert had smiled and asked if she had received them, clearly delighted. When she pressed further, he remembered the details and timing of the gifts perfectly, and those details matched Betty's memories exactly.
So I thought, maybe, and I asked Robert for a DNA test.
When I heard that, I thought she was a brave girl. For her to bring something like that up on her own. But for you to say something like that, what do you think about your mom and dad?
As for my dad, I don't care. He hardly ever comes home, whether for work or something else, I don't know.
So, Bob ended up becoming an indifferent parent after all, despite using the idea of having kids as a reason to leave me. As I was thinking that, Betty's following words surprised me.
My mom, well, I don't know if they're dating, but she's definitely got a thing for some other guy who isn't my dad. The other day, they even came home together in a taxi.
There was a bitter edge to her words that was hard to ignore. But the other day, didn't you all go to a cafe together as a family?
That was just a forced outing. My dad's idea of playing family. But compared to that, your family looked like you were genuinely having a good time.
She said this in a voice tinged with sadness.
Excuse me, but are you sure Natalie isn't your stepdaughter?
Absolutely not. She's my biological daughter, I said firmly, wrapping my arm around Natalie's back.
Then, back then, my dad was rude to you, wasn't he? I've heard about it before.
Yes. Back then, your father and Susan treated me like that and forced me into a divorce. But as soon as I remarried, I had Natalie, and I've been happy every day since. I completely forgot about your family. When I saw your faces, it took me a moment to even recognize you.
Really? That sounds wonderful.
Hearing that, I felt compelled to help Betty. Something was still twisted within that family. Over the past 6 months, I sat in on Robert and Betty's meetings, listening to their conversations, eventually leading to today's gathering.
It's been a long time, Rachel.
Robert said with a smile.
I don't know who you are.
Rachel replied, clearly flustered.
Well, I might look different now, but DNA doesn't change.
With that, Robert handed the DNA test results to Bob and Rachel. They took the document, unsure of what it was, and stared at it. They saw the results showing no biological relationship between Betty and Bob, but a nearly 100% match between Betty and Robert. As the realization hit, Bob's face paled as he looked sharply at Rachel. Seeing his reaction, Rachel began to panic.
This is wrong. It's fake.
Feel free to test it as often as you like,
Robert replied calmly.
but I doubt the results will change. In fact, I have multiple test results right here from different labs.
He casually pulled out another set of documents, and it was clear he had been thorough. Rachel, in a fit of desperation, lunged at Betty.
What have you done? You.
What have I done? Nothing at all. Where did you come from today, Mom?
What? What are you saying?
Betty rummaged through her bag, pulled out her phone, and after a few taps, showed Rachel the screen.
I received these.
The screen showed photographs of Rachel entering and leaving a hotel with another man.
This is fake. It has to be photoshopped.
No, it's not.
Robert replied calmly.
What makes you think you can say that?
Because I intend to take Betty away from you.
You can't do that.
Rachel shouted.
Oh, I can. Especially now that this parent-child relationship has been proven. And Bob, can you handle that this woman has been deceiving you all along?
Bob froze, unable to respond.
Deceiving?
The words sent a ripple through the room, with the nearby office workers whispering among themselves. I had intentionally gathered everyone here to let them witness this drama unfold. William stepped in, trying to quiet the gossiping employees as he approached us.
Bob, what's going on here?
I don't know. I'm as confused as you are.
Bob's forehead was now glistening with sweat.
But years ago, you left Emily to marry your current wife, right? And now it seems you're stirring up trouble again. That's not fitting behavior for someone in line for a senior position.
What do you mean?
Bob asked, his voice panicked as he looked around frantically. Suddenly, he yelled out.
Stop it! Don't look at me!
In reality, no one was openly staring at him. Everyone was sneaking glances. But to Bob, it felt like their gazes were piercing through him.
What's going on? What are we supposed to do?
Rachel became even more agitated as she saw Bob start to panic.
Well, it's time for you to join us. It's your turn.
Robert signaled, and a man from a nearby table walked over.
This is my attorney. I'm prepared to contest custody and recognition of Betty as my daughter. What do you say?
Bob was at a loss for words, frozen in place. Robert continued to press him.
Doesn't this bother you? Rachel's been raising another man's child as yours all this time. Aren't you angry?
Well, yes, it's infuriating, but without a child at home, my mother.
Oh, I see. I said out loud without meaning to. You've always been weak when it comes to Susan. This made the whispers around us grow a little louder. I could hear one of the office ladies whispering, "So, Bob's a mama's boy, huh?"
Betty, what about you? You wouldn't betray your dad, would you?
Betty tilted her head in response to Bob's panicked voice.
Honestly, it doesn't really matter to me.
Bob looked genuinely shocked. Maybe, in his own way, he did love Betty. That's why her words seemed to cut him so deeply.
Dad, you've been too oblivious, not just about Mom, but about me too.
What do you mean?
I've been meeting with Robert for more than 6 months. You didn't know anything, did you? I knew you didn't care much about me, maybe you were too busy with work. But how could you not even notice Mom's affair? What were you working so hard for?
The sweat on Bob's forehead began to trickle down his cheeks.
Now, let's not go too far.
Robert said, trying to calm the situation.
Because I know that if I were to disappear, Dad wouldn't be running around for me, he'd be doing it for Grandma. He's always telling me things like, "Oh, you got good grades? Grandma will be so happy," or, "You're smart because of our family's genes," as if Mom's side doesn't matter.
Hearing this, Rachel quickly looked away from Betty.
So basically, Dad only wanted a child for Grandma's sake, right? Isn't that true?
Bob was at a loss for words.
See? This is the kind of person he is.
Betty said, her expression slightly sad as she looked at Robert. Just then,
Betty, what are you saying? Your dad has been working hard every day for us.
Rachel suddenly shouted.
And you're betraying him without a second thought, Mom. You didn't even notice, did you? That makes sense since I was hardly ever home. But when I brought it up, Robert checked into it for me.
Checked into it.
That's right.
The lawyer answered this time.
Robert asked me to investigate your affair. We hired a private investigator and gathered solid evidence. The photos you saw earlier are just a small part of it.
Oh, this is unbelievable.
William sighed as he watched the scene unfold.
To think all this could unravel at once. Bob, you've been great at sales, but couldn't keep your family together.
No, but that doesn't mean it's all my fault.
Bob's voice grew weaker with each word. Robert pressed on.
So what will you do? As I mentioned, I'm prepared to fight this in court.
Before he could say anything more, Bob started to sway and then collapsed.
Call an ambulance.
Someone shouted as the room erupted into chaos. Bob's mind couldn't cope with everything happening at once.
Well, there's no helping it. We'll discuss this further at a later time.
Robert said calmly. Then, out of nowhere, Rachel lashed out at Robert.
You've really come up in the world, haven't you? Hiring lawyers and private investigators so easily. You weren't like this back then.
That's right, Robert replied matter-of-factly.
Robert responded as if it were the most natural thing in the world.
Because I got rid of you, a money-draining curse. Now I've got better finances, a successful career, and a wonderful wife.
Hearing this, Rachel's shoulders slumped in defeat. I'm sorry for the disturbance. Please enjoy the rest of your day, I said with a smile to the office workers, watching with great interest. Not long after this incident, Bob and Rachel ended up getting divorced. It was mainly because Susan, Bob's mother, was furious with Rachel. There were two reasons for this. The obvious one was the deception regarding the child, but the other was that it was revealed through testing that Bob was actually infertile. The fact that Bob hadn't discovered this himself only fueled Susan's anger. However, when this brief storm finally passed, she seemed to age overnight. In fact, she even started showing signs of dementia. It became clear that she would soon need care. I heard from William that after stirring up trouble again, Bob was criticized for his poor management skills and was pushed into a dead-end job. But that job is probably the best he can manage now. He suffered several sudden shocks that have left him mentally broken. He had always believed he was in the right, so discovering that I wasn't infertile, that he was sterile, and most painfully, that Betty, whom he thought he had cherished, had easily turned her back on him. All these things hit him, and the tension and confidence that had kept him going in society suddenly snapped. As for Rachel, she tried to run to the man she had an affair with after the divorce, but he quickly distanced himself, claiming he didn't know she was married or her age. Apparently, Rachel had been lying about her age, shaving off 10 years to carry on the affair. According to the lawyer, when she revealed her true age, The man's reaction was pure disgust. With nowhere else to turn, Rachel tried to seek help from her family, but was rejected, leaving her nowhere to go. Since then, Rachel's whereabouts have become a mystery. I can't imagine what a woman who spent her life as a housewife sneaking behind Susan's back can do now. Well, she can fall as far as she's going to fall. As for Betty, she was taken in by Robert and his wife. They pleaded with her to live with them, even briefly, until she became an adult. Robert's wife, I was told, couldn't have children of her own. Over 6 months, they met several times, and Betty grew close to Robert's wife. She hasn't done anything wrong, so I truly hope she finds happiness in the future. After that, whether it was due to the bit of drama or not, the new store thrived. We also became friendly with the company upstairs, bonded by our shared little secret. To the office ladies, the story of a divorced woman who worked hard with a new partner and became the CEO of a chain store has become something they admire. It's a bit embarrassing when they say that, but it makes me realize how much time has changed. Natalie and Betty have been in touch from time to time as well. It's a strange twist of fate, but kids can become friends even in such situations. Though their mothers were once rivals, it has nothing to do with them. Nick watches over the two girls with warm eyes. As I cherish this family, I want to continue working hard, keeping my family in mind, and living a happy life.